Okay, so it's April 20th, 2010, and it's about 7 o'clock in the morning. 10 after 7. And I'm getting ready to reformat two of my Western Digital 640 gigabyte AAKS drives. I've got them all cleared off, and I'm going to put them in a RAID0 array just to see how fast they are. This will actually be my first ever foray into RAID. Normally I just stay away from it because it's been proven too unreliable in the past. RAID0 anyway. This is completely different from backup RAID solutions like RAID5, stuff with redundancy. Anyway, so here's our HD tune results on a single drive. Again, it's the Western Digital 640 gigabyte AAKS drive. You can see we have transfer rate, a minimum of 54.6 megabytes a second, a maximum of 118.2 megabytes a second, and an average of 93.3 megabytes a second. Access time is 15.9 milliseconds on average. A burst rate, transfer rate of 146.7 megabytes a second, and CPU usage goes to -1.0. It always has with this board and these drivers. I doubt that's accurate. There's no way it can be a negative CPU number, but I'm sure the CPU utilization figures are actually really low. So there we go. So here I am on my BIOS. I'm going to go in and enable RAID. If I can find it. There we go. We're going to change it from AHCI to RAID. And then we're going to save and exit. So now I should be able to boot into the RAID utility by hitting some hotkey that I have no idea what it is. Control I. Control I. Control I. Alright, so. Great, I have no idea which. I'm going to have to look at the serial numbers on the drives to know which, shit. To know which drive is what. Okay, so here I am back in the Intel Matrix Storage Manager. Now, when you run into a problem like I have 3 of the same drive, and I only want to RAID 2 of them in RAID0 because the third one has important data on it. That's where I backed everything up to. Well, what you do is go into Windows before you reformat and before you set up your RAID. Use a program like HD Tune and go to the Info tab, and it will tell you not only the drive letter of the drive but the serial number. And so I use the corresponding drive letter and serial number to know which drive. I remembered the serial numbers. So in this case, I want to make drive number 1 and number 3 the RAID volume. We have 0, 1, and 3. Drive 0, the serial number ending in 820, I know for a fact is the drive that I backed everything up to. So I'm going to create a RAID volume. I'll name it volume 0. It'll be a RAID 0. I'm going to select my disks, and I know that I want, you can use anywhere from 2 to 6 disks to create a RAID 0 volume. I would not suggest anything more than 2 drives when you're using a physical hard drive, like with a spindle. If you're using SSDs, well, you could use all 6 if you wanted to. Solid state drives, but definitely I don't even suggest RAID 0 to store documents on. It's good to store, you know, unless you have all this stuff backed up, because you never know what can happen with the RAID 0 array or any sort of RAID array when you are overclocking like I am. So I'm done, so I'm going to hit enter. Capacity is going to wind up at 1,192 gigabytes. Strip size, I have no idea about. I don't know what, oh, it tells you what's typical. RAID0 is 128, RAID 10 is 64K, and RAID 5 would be 64K. So, well, I guess we'll stick with what's typical, which is 128K. Oh, I changed it. 64. Okay, stripe size. Capacity. Okay. Interesting. So I could create two partitions in effect. If I wanted to lower the which I'm not. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit create volume. It's going to warn me all data on the selected disk. Boy, I hope I remembered those serial numbers right. Hit yes, and now we have a new RAID volume. RAID volume 0, stripe 128K, strip size 128K, size just about 1.2 terabytes. Status normal, bootable yes. So now I'm going to exit. Yes, I'm sure I want to exit. And now what I'm going to do is boot into my handy dandy USB thumb drive based Windows installer. Well, it's telling me boot manager is missing because obviously I just created a new driver. So I'm going to reboot, hit F12 to get into my on-the-fly boot menu. Hopefully. There we go. Thumb drives almost always show up as a hard disk, especially on gigabyte BIOSes. So, there's my Kingston data traveler. You can see SCSI 0 is my existing single non-rated Western Digital 640 gig, and SCSI 1 is Intel Volume 0, which is a RAID. So, I'm going to go to my Kingston data traveler and boot into the Windows installer. Okay, so I hit next a little bit too fast, but basically I'm at the point where Windows wants to pick a drive to choose from. And it's very important that you do this. I selected load driver, and I happen to have the drivers on this thumb drive located in the drivers. And this is the Intel SATA RAID F6 64-bit driver. You'll see once I select that it shows up there. So then I'm going to hit next to go ahead and install, and now it's installing the drivers, and then it'll rescan my bus for all the drives I have. It's very important that you use this. They call it an F6 driver on Intel's website, and you need to choose which is 64-bit or 32-bit depending on the version of Windows you're using. And if you do not use this driver, odds are your Windows installation will not either will not complete, or it'll complete and you won't get the performance that you want out of it. Windows 7 does include rudimentary support for RAID on Intel chipset, so you might get away with not using the latest drivers, but I would suggest that you do. So now I'm done. You can see my old partition video editing. Thank goodness this happens to be the drive that I backed up everything on. So disk 1 unallocated space, you'll see that it's about 1.2 terabytes or 1192 gigabytes. And so I'm not even going to bother with creating a partition or anything like that. I'm just going to click next and let Windows do its thing. And now since we're installing from the thumb drive of doom up there, that little pink and white thumb drive, and we're installing onto a RAID 0 array, we should be pretty fast. I'll let you know. Here we go, we're all finished basically. I'd say it took about 14 minutes from start of installation to getting to all this mumbo jumbo where it's asking you home network name and the serial number and all that kind of crap. So definitely faster than installing it on a single drive, although not quite as fast as I would like it to be. Part of that's because you can only decompress files so fast no matter how many drives you have.